Sparkles, welcome to Beyond Fortune. Here, every story is more than just romance. It's about second chances, unexpected encounters, and love that changes lives forever. But before we begin, take a second to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who loves powerful stories. Your support helps us bring even more unforgettable tales right here to you. Now imagine this. You walk out of a glittering party, the music still echoing in the background. You see a quiet man leaning against a car, almost invisible in the night. You think he's just the driver, waiting for the next guest. But what if that stranger wasn't who you thought he was? What if he owned the entire hotel standing tall behind you? And that moment would change everything. The bass from the ballroom still thumped through the marble, like a heartbeat she didn't share. Mia pushed through the revolving door, the midtown air cool and sharp on her cheeks. Laughter spilled onto the sidewalk, tuxedos and sequins, a world with its own zip code. She hugged her thrifted wrap tighter and exhaled. Okay, breathe, like a private rule. Across the valet lane, a black town car idled, taillights steady as a metronome. A man leaned by the passenger door, hands in his coat pockets, face half in shadow. He had the look of someone who'd been waiting a long time and didn't mind it. She glanced back at the chandelier glow and then at him, grateful for the quiet. New York could be loud even at midnight, but this little pocket felt like pause. A valet jogged by, calling, "Heads up," as a yellow cab nosed in, horn polite for once. Steam curled from a street grate, the city's never-ending exhale into winter. Mia's breath made clouds. Her heels pinched, the borrowed dress begged. "For mercy. Rough night?" she asked the man, voice soft, for the sake of the dark. He tilted his head, and the corner of his mouth almost smiled. "I've seen worse," he said, voice low, as if he didn't want to wake the avenue. "You waiting on someone from the party?" she asked, nodding at the spinning doors. "Something like that," he answered, amused without giving anything away. His coat wasn't the uniform the other drivers wore, but the posture was the same still. Mia shifted her weight, shoes complaining again, dignity in open revolt. "You folks must hear it all out here," she said. "Name-dropping, emergency exits, the works. People say a lot when they think no one's listening," he said gently. She laughed, the tired kind, like a bodega bell at closing. "Facts," she said, rolling the word like a local. "They don't see the crew, only the stage." He let the thought stand, as if it had earned its spot on the curb. "Long shift?" he asked, eyes finding hers, curious instead of appraising. "Double," she said. "Day job, then helping a friend inside. You know how rent is." He nodded, and it didn't feel like politeness. It felt like understanding. "Queens," she added. "Far enough to feel it, close enough to fake it." "Queens has the best bakeries," he said, almost conspiratorial. "Say no more," she grinned. "Rugula on 63rd? Don't get me started." A gust whipped along 5th, tugging at the hem of her dress like a needy child. "The city's got a way of humbling you," she said, "even when you think you're good. New York keeps the receipt," he murmured, and she laughed again. "Exactly. You mess up, the MTA announces it to the whole car. We're sorry for the inconvenience," he quoted, perfectly deadpan. "You nailed the tone," she said, world-weary, vaguely apologetic. "Practice," he said, looking past her toward the doors, then back like he chose not to. The music dipped, then swelled, a tide she'd stepped out of and didn't miss. "Inside feels loud," she said, searching. "Like everyone's. Selling, no one's buying." "What would you buy?" he asked, the question landing softly. "Silence," she said, "and coffee that isn't burnt." He lifted his chin toward the corner. "There's a 24-hour spot 2 blocks down." "Yeah, but I'm Team Bodega," she said. $2, light and sweet, and a cat for vibes." "Respect," he said, the word warmer than a chuckle. She studied him, the way he wore quiet like a perfectly tailored suit. "Do you ever get sick of waiting?" she asked. "For other people's schedules, moods, storms?" "Sometimes waiting is where the real things show up," he said, almost to himself. "That sounds poetic," she teased, though she meant it. He shrugged like poetry was just another shift he had learned to work. From the curb, a tipsy guest called out, "Driver," at no one in particular. The man's eyes flicked over, alert without flinching. He didn't move. A valet swept in, professional gravity on full display, and handled the chaos. Mia watched the exchange, then glanced back at him, curiosity pricking again. "You're not with that guy, right?" she said, half whisper, half joke. He shook his head. "Not with him." "Lucky you," she said. He'd tip in advice. He smiled for real then, quick and contained, like it wasn't used to sunlight. "What do you do, Mia?" he asked, testing the name she hadn't given. She blinked, then remembered her tag from earlier, still pinned inside her wrap. "Oh, caught. Housekeeping trainee, mornings. Host stand, nights, when they need me. 2 lanes, same highway," he said. "That's a lot of people to carry." "Someone's gotta," she said, not martyrdom, just math. "My aunt's hips aren't what they were." "Family first," he said, like it was a phrase he believed before it hurt. "You," she asked. "How long you been doing nights?" "Like this?" "A while," he said, and for a second the city noise stepped back. It fit at first. Then it became what fit me, he added, choosing each word. Mia recognized the shape of that answer. It looked like compromise. "Well, hey," she said, brightening. "At least you get front row tickets to human nature." He made a little sound, agreement or ache. She couldn't tell which. "I'll put that on a resume," he said. "Special skills, listening." She fished in her clutch and pulled a granola bar, half crushed, wholly sincere. "Peace offering," she said. "Driver solidarity. I know folks forget you're human." He looked at the bar like it was a medal, not a snack, then accepted. "Thank you," he said, and she heard the kind that doesn't get used enough. "Don't mention it," she replied. "No biggie. You get out here." "I am," he said, and somehow it sounded like he meant right now with her. Her cheeks warmed. The wind wasn't that generous. A stretch SUV rolled up, blocking the view of the lobby for a beat. When it pulled off, the world came back bright. Horns, heels, glitter, breath. "City never sleeps," she said. "It naps with one eye open and a hand on its wallet." "That's the brochure," he said, dry as a January sidewalk. She laughed into her knuckles, a laugh she didn't have to apologize for. "Anyway, I should bounce," she said. "On me tap, Q train, reality. Get home safe," he said, and the words landed with care instead of habit. "What's your name?" she asked, because it felt wrong to leave it blank. "James," he said, letting it stand between them without title or context. "Nice to meet you, James who waits well," she said, offering a small, real smile. "And you, Mia who carries people," he said, like he'd recognized something true. She tucked a loose strand behind her ear, the city wind trying to take it back. "If the bodega cat asks, I was never here," she joked. "Fugget about it," he said, very nearly a New Yorker, and she grinned. A door guy shouted for a ride, and 3 conversations crossed like streams. Someone whistled for a cab. A siren flashed a block up, then faded. Mia stepped backward, reluctant in ways that surprised her, then turned. Her heels clicked toward the corner, the rhythm of a night finally closing. James watched, the granola bar unopened in his hand, like proof of something. He didn't chase. He didn't need to. He had learned to let moments breathe. Still, the space she left behind felt oddly, specifically his to keep. At the crosswalk, she looked back, almost. Instinct, and found him still. He lifted a small wave, unshowy, like the city's private salute. She answered with 2 fingers from her wrap, a queen's goodnight, all heart. The light changed. She went. The street took her and made it make sense. James inhaled the winter and the engine fumes and the last echo of her laugh. Patience was a language he spoke, but tonight it felt like hope. He slipped the bar into his pocket like a promise to remember. Inside, applause burst for something expensive and unremarkable. A publicist streaked by in cold perfume, phone lit like a lighthouse. James stayed where he was, as if moving would break the thin new thread. He thought about silence and coffee and bodega cats guarding register drawers. He thought about the way she'd said family like a roof, not a weight. Waiting, he had said, was where real things show up. He hadn't expected proof. He glanced at the hotel's name etched in brass and saw it differently. The town car idled. Faithful, red lights breathing, a pulse he could set by. A valet asked, "You need anything, sir?" And James shook his head, gentle. "No, thanks. All good," he said, the phrase small, the meaning not. He checked the door again, not for whoever people expected, but for chance. New York was built on chance, on corners, on seconds that decide. He had the means to buy time, but tonight time had bought him. Across the street, Mia vanished into a moving constellation of strangers. He looked up, past the canopies and the flags, to the stories stacked in glass. Even from the curb, he knew which hallway lights were on and why. He knew the schedules, the payrolls, the pressure of 1,000 paychecks. He knew the cost of flowers in the lobby and how guests judged by scent. He knew the ballroom's acoustics and the chef's stubbornness about salt. He knew everything here, and almost nothing that mattered like that laugh. People say a lot when they think no one's listening, he'd said, and meant it. A final burst of confetti breath from the revolving door drifted out, then settled. James straightened, placed his hand on the car roof, felt the city hum through steel. Somewhere in Queens, a bodega cat would blink slow approval at a stranger. Somewhere on a platform, a tap would register home in a small green light. He could call for the car to swing around, or for the night to end on time. He did neither. He let the quiet keep teaching him what to want. Behind him, the hotel he owned rose like a secret she didn't know yet. Mia woke up before sunrise, as always. The alarm on her phone buzzed in its insistent rhythm, reminding her that the morning shift waited for no one. The apartment in Queens was small, but it carried the warmth of family memories. Old photos were taped to the walls, reminders of better days. She set water to boil and grabbed a cheap bagel from the week's box. "Another day, here we go," she murmured to herself, tying her hair into a simple bun on the subway. The heavy Monday air mixed with the smell of spilled coffee. Workers squeezed in, backpacks bumping, everyone lost in their own thoughts. Mia's eyes wandered to the colorful ads for quick courses and delivery apps. An older man from Brooklyn read the newspaper, folding the pages with precision. Beside him, two young guys debated the Knicks' latest game, their voices full of passion. The city, even exhausted, pulsed in every detail. The hotel, Mia slipped into her housekeeping uniform, straightening the tag with her name on it. The supervisor rushed down the hallway, barking orders at a rapid pace. "Room 312 needs to be ready in 20 minutes. Let's go, people." Mia grabbed the cleaning cart, pushed it down the polished corridor, and sighed. Guests hurried by, talking on their phones, never noticing her. She was used to being invisible there, just another cog keeping everything running. As she vacuumed the plush carpet, her mind drifted to the night before. The quiet man in the parking lot, James. The way he had listened without rushing, as if every word carried weight. Weird. He felt different, she thought, tucking fresh sheets with practiced hands. She couldn't explain it, but something in him had made her feel truly seen, even if it was just a brief conversation. She shook her head, reminding herself her reality was something else entirely. Across the city, James sipped coffee in a glass-walled office at the top floor of the hotel. The silver pot reflected the morning light, while aides stacked reports in front of him. "Reservations for next quarter are up 8%, one said. Another pitched new strategies against Las Vegas competitors. James nodded, but his mind wandered back to Mia's genuine smile. The contrast between spreadsheets and that memory felt almost cruel. "We need decisions, Mr. Lancaster," pressed the operations director. James agreed, replying with clipped sentences, lacking the usual fire. The weight of leading hundreds of employees grew heavier every year. He had mastered commanding the room through silence, but inside him, the emptiness kept expanding. While everyone talked about profit margins, he thought of how one granola bar Mia had offered said more about humanity than all those reports combined at a tea lunch. James chose to step out alone. He headed down to the street and grabbed a coffee from a small corner cafe. The barista recognized him, but only remarked on the cold weather. "Stay warm out there, man." James thanked him, almost relieved. He drank slowly, watching regular folks rushing to work, crossing the street in the city's hurried rhythm. For the first time in a long while, he wondered if he wasn't losing touch with the essence of real life. Meanwhile, Mia finished her shift, cleaning the last room before 3 p.m. She slipped quietly onto the staff bench, drinking water and resting her feet. Her co-worker, Maria, teased, "You look distracted today, girl. Got a new crush?" Mia laughed, waving her hands. "No way, just a weird chat last night." Maria arched her brows, intrigued, but didn't press. In that place, Everyone carried little secrets they never shared. Back on the subway, Mia stole a few minutes of silence. She pulled out an old notebook and started scribbling. She liked writing down loose thoughts, phrases that helped her organize her mind. Not every rich person is cold. Not every ordinary person is invisible, she wrote, realizing she was thinking of James. She tucked the notebook away quickly when an older woman beside her peeked curiously. The city didn't allow for long daydreams, not in the afternoon rush. That night, the apartment buzzed with life. Her aunt cooked pasta with a simple sauce, the smell filling the place with comfort. Her nephew worked on homework at the kitchen table, asking about tough words. Mia sat beside him, helping him spell. The routine, though tiring, warmed her heart. It was this sense of responsibility that kept her steady. Still, part of her couldn't shake the memory of James's eyes, like he, too, was searching for something more. At the hotel office, James reviewed contracts late into the night. An assistant walked in to ask if he wanted dinner sent from the French restaurant. He refused. Instead, he unwrapped a folded pizza slice he'd picked up on the street earlier. As he chewed, he smiled, remembering how Mia had spoken about the bodega cat like it was the city's guardian. Small details his luxury life overlooked, yet they felt more real than any banquet. The chime of a new email rang on his computer. It was an invitation to a charity gala with politicians and investors. James scanned the guest list and shut the screen with no interest. He thought back to Mia joking about buying silence and unburnt coffee. He laughed to himself, a short but genuine laugh. Strange how a 5-minute conversation could echo louder than an entire day of meetings. As she lay down, Mia stared at the worn ceiling of her room. The old heater hummed, blending with distant sirens outside. She closed her eyes, knowing tomorrow would be the same. Wake up early, rush to work, carry her household's weight. But deep down, she knew something had shifted. That stranger had left a quiet mark, as if he had opened a window in her heart. James, in his vast and luxurious suite, gazed at Manhattan's lights. The city looked like a living constellation, each light a story unfolding. Even surrounded by everything, he felt utterly alone. He stretched out on the king-size bed, the empty space around him feeling exaggerated, almost cruel. Before closing his eyes, he recalled Mia saying, "Somebody has to carry it." And he wondered if all he carried was the weight of nothing. The next morning brought more meetings for James. Consultants debated graphs, showing growing profits. He nodded, but a nagging thought lingered. "We're on top of the market," one boasted. James thought, "But who's at the top with me?" The voices around him blurred, distant. The silence of the parking lot last night had felt far more honest than all their words. Meanwhile, Mia grabbed coffee from the neighborhood bakery before work. The clerk knew her by name, handing it over with a smile. "Light and sweet, right, Han?" Mia chuckled, thanking her. The warm aroma fought back the morning chill. Walking down the sidewalk, she thought about how small acts of kindness made life bearable. She didn't need luxury, just authenticity. James, during an unexpected break, went down to the lobby. He watched employees rushing everywhere, each carrying unseen burdens. He realized he rarely looked at them closely. His thoughts drifted to Mia again, remembering how she spoke so naturally, without masks. For the first time, he asked himself, how many invisible stories passed right before his eyes every single day. That afternoon, fate began to weave again. Mia got a call from her friend who had been at the party. She'd left an expensive coat at the hotel and begged Mia to pick it up. Tired but understanding, Mia agreed, knowing her friend couldn't make it back anytime soon. She freshened up simply and hopped on the subway to Manhattan, unaware of what awaited her from his office. James received word that someone was coming down to retrieve a forgotten item. Without knowing who, he decided to deliver it personally, looking for any excuse to break routine. When the elevator doors opened, his eyes landed on the face that had been haunting his thoughts. Mia stood there, clutching the coat tag, just as surprised to see him. For a few seconds, silence hung between them, time itself pausing. Mia blinked, startled, recalling the night in the parking lot. "You?" she whispered, almost in disbelief. James smiled faintly, not as the CEO, but as the man she had met on the street. In that instant, two very different worlds collided again. about to begin a journey that would change everything. Mia didn't know what to do with her hands. The hotel lobby felt like another planet, gleaming marble floors and chandeliers reflecting every movement. She wasn't in her housekeeping uniform this time, just a simple coat, completely out of place in all that luxury. When her eyes met James's, standing right there in front of her, the memory of the previous night came rushing back. The quiet man, almost invisible in the parking lot. But here, in the grand lobby, he seemed to belong to the walls themselves. James held Mia's friend's forgotten coat with ease. No security, no assistance, no barriers stood between them at that moment. "You?" Mia murmured, still stunned. He smiled, restrained, as if confirming a shared secret. "That's me," he replied. His gaze was steady, without arrogance, searching her face as if to recognize the same woman from last night. Mia blinked quickly, trying to process. Reality. Screamed. He was no driver. "You work here?" she ventured, her voice tinged with doubt and curiosity. James drew a deep breath before answering. "Actually, I run this place." Mia raised her brows, disbelief written all over her face. You're the manager?" He let out a short laugh. "Something like that. I own it." The word hung in the air, far too heavy to ignore. Mia almost whispered impossible, but bit it back. The ground beneath her feet felt like it had shifted, as if she'd tripped over a hidden truth. The front desk clerk handed over the coat formally, but Mia barely noticed. She was face to face with a man who was no longer just the quiet stranger from the lot. "You should have said something yesterday," she accused, folding her arms. James lifted his hands in mock surrender, amused. "You didn't ask." Mia sighed, unable to hide a nervous smile. His honesty disarmed her, even in the middle of all that grandeur. James seized the silence to take a chance. "Can I buy you a coffee?" Nothing fancy in the lobby, just around the corner. Mia hesitated, glancing around, feeling completely out of place. "Why?" she asked, suspicious. He tilted his head. "Because last night was different, and I'd like to keep that conversation going." His eyes carried a surprising honesty. Mia swallowed hard. Part of her wanted to say no. Another part was far too curious. "Fine, but only if it's regular coffee. No crystal glasses," she teased, trying to lighten the mood. James smiled in a way that seemed rare for him. "Deal. Bodega style." They walked out together, their worlds colliding in even the smallest details. Mia's steps were quick, used to the city's rush. James walked steady but reserved, like someone who rarely blended into the crowd. The contrast stood out, but for them, time felt suspended. Inside the corner cafe, the scent of fresh coffee and sweet bread created a warm atmosphere. The cashier greeted them with that unmistakable New York accent. "What can I get for you?" Mia ordered her usual, light and sweet. James, after a pause, asked for the same, making her smile. "Careful, it's addictive," she warned. He chuckled. "If it's anything like last night, I'll take the risk." They sat by a small window table, the winter air pressing softly against the glass. Mia folded her arms on the table, studying him more closely. "So, hotel owner, huh? That changes everything." James shook his head. "Does it?" She raised her brows. "Of course it does. Yesterday, I thought you were a driver. Today I find out you're, well, the man behind all of this." James gripped his coffee cup as if needing an anchor. "Yesterday, I was just someone who listened. That doesn't change." The silence between them wasn't awkward, it carried weight. Mia noticed the way he spoke without arrogance, without the mask she imagined rich people wore. James, in turn, saw in Mia a steady simplicity, something absent from his world. "Why? Did you talk to me last night?" he asked, breaking the pause. "Because you looked invisible, and I know what that feels like," Mia replied without hesitation. The words hit James like a quiet punch. He turned toward the window, watching the street fill with rushing strangers. "Sometimes invisible is better than being noticed for the wrong reasons," he murmured. Mia tilted her head. "You don't seem like someone who gets that luxury." James let out a humorless laugh. "The luxury of being invisible is the only one I actually want." Mia drew a deep breath, realizing there was more to him than money. As they talked, James gradually relaxed, as if that cramped cafe felt more comfortable than any ballroom. He spoke about small things, how terrible the office coffee was, Memories of going with his dad to buy donuts at a corner bakery when he was a kid. Mia laughed at the details, interrupting with everyday expressions. "You're kidding me," or "Get out of here." He mimicked her, laughing too, amazed at her lightness. Time seemed to dissolve. For Mia, it was strange feeling so at ease, with someone carrying so much power. For James, it was rare not having to prove anything. "What about your family?" Mia asked, curious. He paused before replying. "Complicated. Too much money, not enough truth." The words were blunt but real. Mia nodded, understanding without needing details. Sometimes, a single phrase revealed an entire wound. "And you?" he asked back. Mia sighed, stirring her now cold coffee. "My aunt, my nephew. They're everything. Double the work, but worth it. They depend on me." James studied her determined tone, the way simplicity became strength. He realized she carried heavier responsibilities than she let on. And unlike most people around him, she didn't play the victim. She just kept moving. A call interrupted them. James's phone buzzed with an investor's name flashing on the screen. He declined it, flipping the phone face down. "That can wait," Mia asked, surprised. "Not more than you," he answered plainly, without flourish. Mia froze, and used to hearing something so direct from someone like him. Her heart skipped, but she hid it behind a sip of coffee. Outside, a group of students passed by laughing loudly, their energy spilling into the street. Mia glanced at them, thinking how youth carried such lightness, while she bore her burdens too early. James noticed her distraction. "You should laugh like that more often," he said. She raised her brows. "You barely know me." He smiled. "But I already know your laugh changes the street." Mia rolled her eyes, but couldn't hide a shy grin. Time was slipping, and Mia remembered she had to go. "I need to head back. If I'm late, my aunt worries." James nodded, though his face showed reluctance. "At least let me walk you to the station?" Mia hesitated. "You don't have to," he insisted. "Consider it a gift. No chauffeur, no luxury car. Just a walk." The way he said it sounded more human than any grand gesture done on the way to the subway. They walked side by side, blending into the city crowd. James kept his hands in his pockets like any New Yorker bracing against the wind. Mia pointed out details of the neighborhood: the graffiti mural, the bakery with the best brownies, the tiny bookstore on the corner. James listened as if she was mapping out a new world. For the first time in ages, he didn't need to be the owner of anything. At the station entrance, Mia stopped. "This is me." He nodded, not pushing it further. "Thanks for the coffee," she said, adjusting her bag. James drew a breath before replying. "Thank you for talking to me like I'm just James." Mia smiled, offering no answer. She disappeared down the steps, swallowed by the flow of strangers. James stood there for a while, staring at the subway entrance. The cold wind bit at his skin, but he barely felt it. His phone buzzed again in his pocket, pulling him back toward the weight of corporate life. Still, for a few moments, he managed to ignore it. He walked slowly back to the hotel, carrying the sense that something inside him had shifted. Her simple words, her directness, her laugh, they echoed louder than any boardroom on the subway. Mia gripped the rail as the train lurched forward. The metallic noise filled her ears, but her mind was elsewhere. "James, hotel owner," she repeated to herself, struggling to believe it. Part of her wanted distance, to avoid getting carried away. Yet another part couldn't deny the warmth that strange connection stirred. Deep down, she sensed this encounter was only the beginning. That night, as James gazed at Manhattan's glowing skyline and Mia tucked her nephew's books away, both thought the same thing. Two worlds, completely different, two realities that shouldn't align. Yet an invisible thread was already tying them together. A thread made of silence, genuine laughter, and glances that saw past the surface. It was only the beginning, but already there was no turning back. In the days that followed, James couldn't get Mia out of his head. Between meetings and endless calls, he kept remembering the way she laughed. Effortless, like she carried a piece of the city in her voice. He decided to take a chance. He phoned the corner cafe and asked them to let him know if she showed up. He didn't want to come off intrusive, just hoped for another simple conversation. And when, on a cold morning, he found Mia there holding a cheap coffee cup, he knew luck was on his side. Mia was surprised to see him. "You again?" she asked, eyebrow arched. James smiled. Or maybe you're just always in the right places." She laughed, but kept a little distance. "I'm not sure this is a good idea." He stepped closer, bought a light-in sweet for himself, and sat beside her. "It doesn't have to be complicated. I just want to hear more about you, Mia." The way he said her name made her heart race, though she tried to hide it, giving in to his persistence. Mia took him to a neighborhood diner in Queens, where she'd grown up. The walls were covered with old baseball photos, and the server called everyone honey or darling. James looked out of place at first, but relaxed when Mia ordered waffles with butter and syrup. "You gotta fold it like a sandwich." "It's an unwritten rule," she said. James obeyed, making her burst out laughing when he got syrup on himself. The contrast was obvious. James, used to French restaurants, was now immersed in a warm, unpretentious culture. Mia chatted with neighbors, greeted people by name, told little stories. James watched, fascinated by how naturally she belonged there. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," he said at one point. Mia just smiled, stirring her coffee. "That's the secret, James. The harder you try, the less charm it has." Not everyone saw their closeness in a good light. When his driver picked him up later, he gave Mia a disdainful once-over. "She doesn't look like your level, sir." James frowned. "Since when do you set the levels?" The comment hung in the air, but it stung. Mia caught the look and felt her face burn. Suddenly, the weight of their different worlds landed on her shoulders. No matter how light she tried to keep things, there were always invisible barriers. Back at the hotel, Aide started whispering. Photos of James and Mia leaving a local cafe were quietly circulating. "This could affect your image," a consultant warned. James breathed in, irritated. "My image isn't more important than the truth." Even so, judgment felt inevitable. When Mia heard about the rumors, she flushed with shame. "I don't want to be a headline because of you," she said, avoiding him. But James didn't back down. That he went to her neighborhood. No luxury car this time, just a dark coat and steady steps. He found Mia in front of the modest building, helping her aunt with grocery bags. "You shouldn't be here," she said, nervous. "Why not?" he asked. "Because your world isn't this one. You'll end up regretting it." James shook his head. "There's no your world and my world. There's only what we choose to live." Mia sighed, exhausted, but couldn't ignore his sincerity. She agreed to walk with him around the block. He seemed enchanted with small things. The bright graffiti, kids playing ball in the street, the smell of pizza drifting from an open window. "This is the real New York," James said, as if discovering something new. Mia smiled. "Welcome to the real world, James." And for the first time, he felt like he belonged to something outside of luxury. But the social barriers snapped back fast. When they returned to Manhattan, the looks in the hotel lobby had changed. Guests whispered. Security sized her up and down. Mia felt tiny, like she had no right to be there. James noticed and tried to soften it. "Ignore them, Mia. They don't know who you are." She answered, steady. "They don't have to. They already decide just by looking." Her words echoed deep inside him. That evening, James invited Mia to dine at the hotel restaurant. She hesitated but accepted, wearing a simple dress she saved for rare occasions. The moment she stepped into the elegant room, the judgmental stares returned. Servers treated her with exaggerated formality, as if questioning her presence. James tried to distract her with conversation, but she could barely relax. Every glance seemed to say, "You don't belong here." "Are you uncomfortable?" James asked, worried. Mia drew a breath. "It's not the place. It's the people. They don't see who I am, just what I'm not." James took her hand, despite the staring. "Then let them stare. I see you." The gesture was sincere, but the discomfort lingered. Mia realized that no matter how hard James tried, there was an invisible gap between their lives. After dinner, she left in a rush, turning down James's car. "I need the subway. I need to remember who I am." He tried to walk her out, but Mia was firm. "Don't follow me. I need space." James let her go, but the emptiness that remained hurt more than any quiet room. For the first time, he feared that this connection was crumbling before it even began. That night, Mia cried silently in her room. She didn't know if it was anger, shame, or missing something she hadn't even lost yet. "He's not for you," she kept repeating, but her heart wouldn't listen. The memory of his eyes, the way he said her name, was stronger than logic. And no matter how she tried, She couldn't shake the feeling that James wasn't like the others. In his penthouse, James stared at the city like it was a glass prison. The luxury, the contracts, the parties, none of it meant anything without the smile that had changed him. "Why is this so hard?" he muttered, thinking of a simple bodega coffee. He wished he could go back to being just the quiet man in the parking lot, invisible, with no barriers. But he knew life wouldn't allow that, not with a name and a fortune on his back. In the days that followed, the distance between them grew. Mia dodged his messages, throwing herself into work and family. James tried to respect that, but his need to see her only grew. Meetings became unbearable, contracts meaningless. "You're distracted," an aide noted. James just smiled, not denying it. He was tired of living in a world of appearances. Then came a new twist. A photo of the two of them at the diner ran in a city gossip column. The headline was cruel: "Mysterious tycoon with unlikely new company." Mia saw it on her phone in the subway and felt her stomach drop. People looked at her like she was the subject of whispers. The ground vanished beneath her feet. "This is what I was afraid of," she thought, tears threatening. James saw the headline too and was livid. He shut off all notifications, but it was too late. The damage was done. "She doesn't deserve this," he kept repeating, angry and helpless. He grabbed his phone to call, but couldn't bring himself to press dial. He knew he needed to face her in person, to explain, to apologize even without fault. And above all, to show her he didn't see her as unlikely company, but as someone essential. That same day, Mia turned down James's invitation to meet. "I don't want to be part of your exposure," she texted flatly. He drew a long breath, pain cutting deep. But instead of giving up, he chose to wait. He knew silence could be a bridge or a wall, and he'd choose patience. Still, he feared the invisible barriers might become impossible to cross. Home, Mia spoke with her aunt, who could see her anguish. "Sweetheart, sometimes what we fear most is exactly what we need to face." Mia shook her head. "But what if I end up hurt?" Her aunt smiled. "You're already hurt. The question is it worth it?" The question lingered. And for the first time, Mia considered that maybe she wasn't the only one afraid. Maybe James was fighting invisible barriers too. The next morning, Mia stepped into the subway with her eyes fixed on the floor. The tabloid headlines still burned in her mind. "Mysterious tycoon with unlikely company." The phrase echoed like a cruel judgment, as if her simple life was a flaw instead of a reality. Curious glances in the train car made her uncomfortable, even though no one really knew who she was. She felt the weight of exposure she had never asked for. At work, co-workers whispered as soon as she walked in. Maria, her closest friend, tried to mask it. "You okay, girl?" Mia just nodded, too drained to explain. Other staff murmured, "That's her from the photo. And what does he even see in her?" Each whisper was a silent stab. Mia gripped the cleaning cart tightly, repeating to herself that she just had to finish her shift. Her heart, however, pounded like it was trying to escape. Across town, James was fighting his own storm. Investors called, demanding to know if the rumors were true. This could tarnish the company's image, one warned. The press loves turning everything into scandal. James clenched his fist. "It's not a scandal. It's just my life." But he knew that, in his world, his life never truly belonged to him. It was always under the critical gaze of those who profited from his image. The press was merciless. Local blogs began posting articles about Mia, labeling her a regular worker from Queens. The comments were even harsher. "She's just after his money," or "another one taking advantage of a clueless millionaire." James read a few lines before slamming his phone down in anger. It wasn't just unfair, it was cruel. He knew Mia wanted nothing from him except honest conversation. When Mia read some of those comments, her stomach twisted. It wasn't just about her. It was about her family, her neighborhood, her whole life. "They don't know anything," she muttered, tears falling silently. She decided to avoid James, not because she didn't feel anything, but to protect herself. "I don't belong in his world. I never will," she thought, curling up in her small bedroom. Every step closer felt like it would only make her bleed deeper. But James didn't give up. He showed up in her neighborhood, walking narrow streets without bodyguards. He found her coming out of the market, arms full of heavy bags. "Mia, we need to talk." She tried to walk past him. "There's nothing to say, James." The story's already written by them. He caught her arm, not harshly, just firm enough. They don't know you. I do. She met his gaze with tear-filled eyes. You think you do, but you don't know what it's like to live under judgment every single day. Her words struck deep. For the first time, James realized that though he had everything, he'd never known what it was to be judged just for existing simply. He was criticized for being wealthy, but not for being less. There was a brutal difference. Then teach me, he said, voice nearly breaking. Mia shook her head. You can't teach that. You just live it. And I don't want you living that way because of me. That night, James faced a tense board meeting. You need to cut ties with her immediately, a director suggested. The hotel brand can't be compromised. James stood, furious. You talk about it like it's a business deal. It's not. This is my life. Silence fell across the room, but no one seemed to understand. For the first time, James felt like a prisoner inside the glass walls he had built himself. Meanwhile, Mia clung to her routine. She helped her nephew with homework, cooked with her aunt, laughed at old jokes. But every smile carried a shadow. James's name echoed in her mind like a song that wouldn't stop. She wanted to believe she could just forget, but her heart wouldn't listen. Why him? She asked herself, knowing there'd be no easy answer. Alone in his penthouse, James thought of that night in the parking lot, of how Mia had seen him as just a quiet man. No headline could steal that from him. I'm not just the hotel owner, he repeated to himself. And she's not just some girl from Queens. He scribbled notes on a pad, writing loose phrases, trying to untangle his feelings. For the first time, he felt vulnerable enough to admit he needed her. The next day, James showed up at the hotel at an unusual hour. He walked through the lobby like any guest, no entourage. He looked for Mia in the hallways, but she avoided his eyes and kept moving. Mia, please, just 5 minutes. She stopped, exhausted. 5 minutes for what? For you to say you'll protect me? You can't protect me from what people think. The silence between them was thick, heavy with painful truths. Maybe I can't change what they think, James said. But I can show you what I feel. Mia drew a long breath, shaking her head. Feelings don't cancel judgment, James. It doesn't go away just because you see me differently. Her blunt honesty hurt, but it also lit something in him. He realized he had to fight not only the outside world, but the social gap dividing them. Mia returned home drained, but her aunt noticed the weight in her eyes. He came after you, didn't he? The older woman asked. Mia sighed. He did, but I don't know if I can carry this weight. Her aunt cupped her face. Love never comes light, sweetheart. The question is this weight worth the walk? Mia didn't answer, but deep down, she felt it was, even if she couldn't admit it aloud. James, on the other hand, started making bold choices. He canceled social appearances, turned down political invitations. You're being reckless, people scolded. He only replied, I'm being human. Those around him didn't understand, but James knew he had to choose between keeping up a facade or chasing something real. And more, Mia was the answer. On a cold night, James went back to her neighborhood again. He found her sitting on the building steps, staring at the clouded city sky. Why do you keep insisting? Mia asked without looking at him. James sat down beside her, silent for a moment. Because you're the only person who's ever seen me, and I can't go back to being invisible. The words landed like a confession, heavy with pain and hope. Mia's chest tightened. You don't understand. I can't carry this burden anymore. James looked at her seriously. Then let me carry it with you. She laughed bitterly. You don't know what you're walking into. He leaned a little closer. Maybe not, but I know what I feel is real, and that's worth more than any title or fortune. For the first time, Mia believed him. Yet the fear still lingered. The following days stretched in silence. Mia needed time. James needed patience. But both knew destiny was pulling them back together. The outside world twisted their truth, but the moments they'd shared over simple coffees couldn't be erased. It was like a quiet flame, stubborn against the wind. The more they tried to smother it, the brighter it burned. Then new headlines broke, this time about James's family business. Old corruption scandals resurfaced, fueling the media fire. You need to distance yourself now, his lawyer urged. James stood firm. I won't use her as a scapegoat. She has nothing to do with this. When Mia heard, for the first time, she felt compassion for him. She realized James carried invisible weights too. That night, Mia wrote in her old notebook. The truth is never simple. But maybe love is the only way through the lies. She closed it with a deep breath. For the first time, she didn't wish to run. Instead, she wished to understand. Deep down, she knew she'd have to face her fears if she wanted to give what was growing between them a chance. James, staring out at the glowing city, made his choice too. I won't let her face this alone, he told himself. For the first time, he wasn't thinking like a businessman, but like a man. And in that moment, he understood. True love didn't need to be perfect. It just had to be real. James went days without seeing Mia. Her silence hurt more than any cruel headline. He decided that if he wanted to be part of her life, he had to step out of his own world. So, on a cold Saturday afternoon, he threw on a regular coat, took the subway by himself, and headed to Queens. The sway of the train, the smell of pretzels, the sax player on the platform. These were experiences he'd rarely had. He felt vulnerable and somehow free. Mia was leaving the building with her nephew when she saw him standing on the sidewalk. She was surprised, almost irritated. You shouldn't be here. James drew a breath. I came because I needed to. Not to be seen, but to see. She sighed, torn between sending him away and letting him stay. Her nephew grinned at him, breaking the tense air. Is he your friend? He asked. Mia answered, kind of. He offered to help carry their grocery bags. On the way, James took in the neighborhood details, the old shop signs, the colorful murals, the aroma of pizza drifting out an open window. This is the real New York, he said, charmed. Mia eyed him, suspicious. And what you live isn't real. James thought a moment. It is, but it often feels like a facade. They stopped at a food truck selling hot dogs. Her nephew wanted one, and James offered to pay. Two. Please, he said, handing over a bill. Mia watched him take an awkward bite and smear mustard on his tie. She burst out laughing. You weren't born for this. He wiped it with a napkin and smiled. Maybe not, but I want to learn. For the first time, Mia saw something unmistakably human in him. They sat on a bench in the neighborhood park. Kids chased balls, couples walked hand in hand, and the cold wind shook the nearly bare trees. James breathed in. Mia, I don't want you thinking I'm here on a whim. She folded her arms. Then why? He met her eyes. Because you remind me I'm still a person, that I'm not just titles and figures. The silence that followed was intense. Mia didn't know what to say because deep down she felt the same. He made her feel seen, even in the exhaustion of a simple life. James, I don't know if I can handle the weight of your world, she confessed. He leaned forward a little. And I don't know how to handle mine without you. The words hit hard, cracking the defenses she'd tried to keep up. Back at the building, James helped Mia's aunt carry the bags up the stairs. The older woman welcomed him kindly, still unsure who he was. You're a polite young man. Not like the boys these days. James smiled. Shy? Mia watched from a distance, surprised at how naturally he seemed to fit. Her heart split between fear and hope. Maybe there was room for him in her life after all. Later, James asked Mia to walk the neighborhood with him. They passed bakeries, bodegas, and small churches. At each corner, Mia pointed out stories. The used book shop where she bought novels. The newsstand that still sold old-school candies. James listened as if every word were a treasure map. You find value in small things, he said. Mia smiled. Maybe because they're the only things I truly have. Back at the hotel, rumors kept spreading. Aides pressed James to define the relationship. It's a passing distraction, right? They prodded. He answered firmly, no. It's the most real thing that's ever happened to me. The shock was obvious, but James didn't care. He was done letting other people's opinions dictate his life. He knew Mia deserved more than cold explanations. Meanwhile, Mia wrote in her notebook at night. He doesn't belong to my world, but he keeps stepping in. And every time he does, he shows me maybe I deserve to be seen too. The words scared and comforted her at once. She was afraid of getting hurt, but she could no longer deny the force of their connection. Her stubborn heart wouldn't obey the rules she tried to impose. A few days later, James came back without warning. He caught Mia as she left work, tired but surprised to see him. You're persistent. He grinned. And you're still here, which means you haven't thrown me out for good. Mia shook her head, unable to hide a small smile. They walked side by side, sharing the street's quiet. Sometimes, nothing needed to be said. They ducked into a small neighborhood cafe far from any spotlight. They took a corner table, the smell of fresh coffee filling the air. "You're not afraid of being seen here?" Mia asked. James shrugged. "I'm more afraid of not being seen by you." She blushed lightly and looked away. The weight of his words began to knock down the walls she'd built. That night, when they said goodbye, James didn't push. He just held her hand for a few seconds. "Thank you for letting me be here." Mia drew a breath. "I don't know if this will work, James, but thank you for trying." He smiled, satisfied with the slight opening. The quiet between them said more than any promise. Days later, James worked up the nerve to bring Mia to a community meeting he quietly sponsored. "I want you to see this side of my life," he said. The event was at a public school in the Bronx, where he funded scholarships. Mia was surprised by how involved he was, listening to residents, backing projects. For the first time, she saw him outside the tycoon role, just a man trying to make a difference. After the event, they strolled across a court lit by old street lamps. "You never talk about this," Mia said. James smiled. "Because I prefer doing the talking, but I wanted you to see." She looked at him, moved. "You're not who I thought you were." He drew a steady breath. "And you're more than I imagined." The silence that followed was deep, loaded with meaning. The calm didn't last. The next day, photos of them together in the Bronx circulated. Critics claimed James was using Mia as a humanitarian PR stunt. When Mia saw the headlines, she felt anger and pain. "This is what I was afraid of, James. I become a tool, not a person." He tried to explain. "That's not it, Mia. I don't control what they say." But she was tired of fighting shadows she hadn't created. Even so, Mia couldn't walk away completely. Deep down, she knew James was sincere. But the invisible barriers rose again, taller than before. Can you live between two worlds without losing yourself? She wondered, alone in her room. The answer felt distant, but her heart stayed stubborn. Still, something kept her from giving up. In his office, James stared out at the city. He thought about how their truth was constantly distorted. "Maybe strength is found in silence," he murmured. He decided to seek Mia not with speeches, but with presence. He would stand by her, even uninvited, even without promises. Just be there. The way he had that first night in the parking lot. In the days that followed, James showed up in small ways. He brought coffee to her job, left simple notes. "Have a good day." Mia resisted, then smiled as she read them. She realized he was willing to learn the language of silence, a language that spoke louder than speeches. It was in that space, between words, that the two of them began to rebuild. The neighborhood talked, the hotel whispered, the city judged. But between them, an invisible thread was growing stronger. A thread woven from presence, glances, and small gestures. The silence that bound them was also the bridge drawing them closer. They still didn't know how to face the world outside. But in that moment, they learned that true love often grows in silence. The invitation arrived in an elegant envelope, embossed with golden letters. It was the hotel's annual ball, the most anticipated event of the year, packed with politicians, investors, and influential figures. James hesitated before sending it to Mia. He knew it was risky, but he also knew the night meant more than a party. It was his chance to show the world he had nothing to hide. It was the night he'd have to choose between appearances and truth. Mia received the invitation with trembling hands. She had never stepped foot into anything so luxurious, and the idea of entering that ballroom terrified her. She thought about refusing, but something inside wouldn't let her. Maybe it was pride, maybe the need to prove to herself she could stand wherever she chose. "Are you really going?" her aunt asked, worried. Mia drew a deep breath. "Yes, but not for them. For me." On the night of the ball, Mia wore the only elegant dress she owned, a simple navy blue gown. The mirror reflected more nerves than beauty, but her eyes carried determination. When she arrived at the hotel, the lobby was full of camera flashes and whispers. "Who is she?" people murmured. Mia walked with her head high, even though her heart was at war. When James saw her enter, he couldn't hide the light in his eyes. He went to her immediately, ignoring the stares. "You came," he said, relieved. Mia smiled faintly. "Thought I wouldn't survive without seeing this so-called gala night." James laughed. "Then let's survive it together." He offered his arm, and she accepted, even under the weight of the eyes following them. They entered the main hall, where crystal chandeliers lit silk-covered tables. It was a distant world, But she was there. Important guests greeted them, but Mia could see the judgment behind each smile. "She's the girl from the photo," whispered a socialite. "He must be out of his mind." Mia drew a steady breath, trying not to let the words pierce her. James, noticing her discomfort, squeezed her hand discreetly under the table. "Ignore it. What matters is you're here with me." But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. Midway through the night, a powerful investor approached. He was known for arrogance and public jabs. "James finally decided to surprise us," he said, glancing at Mia with disdain. "Didn't know you hired company for events now." Mia's blood boiled, but before she could react, James stood. "With all due respect, she's not here to please you. She's here because I want her here." The ballroom went silent for a moment. The investor smirked. "You're risking your reputation for this?" Mia felt anger rise, but this time she didn't stay quiet. "Maybe you're the one who doesn't understand value. Because I'm not for sale." Her words rang across the hall, sharp and unflinching. Some guests widened their eyes, others chuckled under their breath. James, proud, looked at her as if she were the bravest person he had ever met. After the confrontation, music filled the room again, but Mia couldn't relax. She felt the weight of every stare, every judgment. James tried to distract her, leading her to the dance floor. "Trust me," he whispered, placing his hand on her waist. Mia's heart raced. She hesitated but let him guide her. For the first time, they danced together, their eyes locked, forgetting the world around them for a few fleeting moments. The dance was slow but charged with tension. Mia felt she was trespassing into forbidden territory, but she couldn't deny the intensity. James seemed lighter than ever, as if the music had erased the weight of his life. "You make me forget who I am to the world," he said softly. Mia smiled, though fear lingered in her eyes. "And who are you to me, James?" He drew a breath. "Someone who just wants to stand by your side." Still, the unease crept back. After the dance, Mia pulled away to catch her breath. She stepped out onto the balcony, where the cold night air wrapped around her. She looked at the glowing city and thought, "I don't belong in this world." The tears came, silent. As much as James was sincere, she couldn't ignore the gulf between them. Every judgmental stare weighed too heavily on her heart. James found her leaning against the railing. "Are you okay?" he asked, worried. Mia quickly wiped her tears. "I don't know if I can do this, James. This world isn't mine. I feel suffocated." He stepped closer, trying to comfort her. "The world doesn't matter, Mia. What matters is what we feel." But she shook her head. "Feelings don't erase stares. And I don't want to live hidden behind you." The silence that followed was devastating. James felt her hand slip from his, as if the distance between them stretched wider than the ballroom itself. "Then tell me what you want," he pleaded, his voice nearly breaking. Mia took a deep breath, gazing at Manhattan's lit horizon. "I want to be free. I want to be myself, without carrying the weight of what others say." He swallowed hard, knowing he might never be able to give her that. Suddenly, a group of photographers burst onto the balcony, calling James's name. Flashes exploded, blinding them both. Mia recoiled instinctively. "This is what I mean," she cried, anger and sorrow in her voice. James tried to shield her, but the reporters had already captured the moment. Her heart raced. She couldn't stand to be another headline. "I can't live like this, James. I can't." Without waiting for an answer, Mia hurried out of the ballroom. She ran through elegant hallways, her heels echoing on the marble floor. James followed but couldn't reach her in time. By the time he stepped outside, he saw only a yellow cab pulling away with her inside. His chest tightened. He felt that night he hadn't just lost a dance. He had lost what mattered most. Back in the hall, James faced the emptiness Mia had left. Around him, the world went on as if nothing had happened. Music, laughter, toasts. But for him, everything felt colorless. He thought about how the night was meant to be a celebration, yet had turned into a test. A test he wasn't sure he could pass. And deep down, he realized he had to choose between the hotel and Mia, between appearances and love. Mia, in the cab, cried silently. The driver caught her reflection in the mirror, but said nothing. After a few minutes, he asked softly, "You okay, miss?" She drew a breath. "It will be. It has to be." But her voice cracked. She knew it wasn't just the weight of judgment making her run. It was also the fear of giving herself completely to someone who could change her life forever. At home, her aunt noticed her state and tried to comfort her. "He doesn't seem like a bad man," she said. Mia wiped her tears. "That's not it. He's good, but his world is cruel, and I don't know if I have the strength to live in it." Her aunt stroked her hair. "Sometimes courage isn't in running, but in staying. You have to decide if this love is worth the fight." James, in his penthouse, looked at the city like it was an enemy. He thought of Mia's face as she left, the fear in her eyes. He felt a pain he had never known, the kind he couldn't control, buy, or solve with a contract. For the first time, he was just a man in love, lost. And in that moment, he realized the only choice left was to fight. But the fight wouldn't be against the world. It would be to prove to Mia she wasn't alone. The next morning, the newspapers splashed the photos across their front pages. "The tycoon and his mysterious date," the headline read. James tossed the paper aside, furious. He knew that wasn't the real story, but he also knew that if he didn't act, he would lose Mia forever. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. It was time to choose: keep living for others or finally live for himself. Mia woke up exhausted, her eyes swollen from the night before. She reached for her notebook and wrote, "Love shouldn't be a battle, but maybe true love only exists when it survives the war." She closed the pages, breathed deep, and looked out the window. She knew she couldn't avoid James forever. Sooner or later, she would have to face not only his world, but her own heart. James spent the morning in silence, staring at the city through the glass windows. The headlines were still circulating, but they no longer mattered. What mattered was Mia, the emptiness she'd left when she ran from the ball. He decided he wouldn't make empty promises or grand gestures anymore. That night, he would simply be James, the man she'd met in the parking lot. He took the subway to Queens, blending into the crowd, feeling human again. Mia was sitting on the stoop when he arrived. The morning chill had reddened her cheeks, and her eyes carried exhaustion. When she saw him, she didn't look surprised. "You don't give up, do you?" she said quietly. James drew a breath. "Not on you." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Both of them knew this conversation would define their future. "I can't live in your world," Mia confessed, staring at the ground. "It's cruel, full of stairs and judgment." James sat down beside her. "Then I'll live in yours. I don't need ballrooms or lights to feel alive. I need you." Mia looked at him, confused. "You talk as if it's simple." James smiled, bittersweet. "It's not, but it's the only truth I have." She sighed, hugging her knees. "And what if I lose myself in the process? What if I stop being who I am?" James touched her hand gently. "I don't want to change who you are. I want to learn from you. The way you see the world, that's what saves me." Mia closed her eyes, fighting tears. His honesty stripped away her defenses. Just then, Mia's nephew came running down the stairs, excited. "Auntie, look who's here," he said, grinning at James. The boy hugged him without hesitation, as if he already belonged to the family. The scene warmed Mia's heart, showing just how naturally James had slipped into their lives, simply by being present. "You won him over too fast," Mia said, hiding a smile. James grinned back. "Maybe because he sees what you can't." Later, they walked to the neighborhood cafe. The smell of fresh coffee carried them back to their first conversation. They sat in the same corner, the world outside rushing by. James broke the silence. "That night in the parking lot, I wasn't the hotel owner. I was just a tired man trying to disappear. You saw me, Mia, and that changed everything." She gripped her coffee cup, her hands trembling. "And what if I'm not ready for what comes after?" James looked at her steadily. "Then I'll wait. I've waited my whole life to find something real. I can wait for you." His words struck deep. It wasn't a declaration of power, but of patience. For the first time, Mia believed maybe he wasn't trying to mold her, but to reshape himself to stand by her. Her heart tightened, but it also opened a little more. The following days brought small changes. James started spending more time in the neighborhood, blending in with locals. He bought bread at the bakery, greeted neighbors, even tried playing dominoes with the old men at the square. Mia watched from afar, surprised. He wasn't just visiting, he was trying to belong. "You don't have to prove anything to me," she told him. James replied, "I'm not proving, I'm learning." Still, the barriers didn't vanish. Rumors persisted, Headlines kept coming, but something in Mia shifted. Instead of running, she began facing the stairs with more strength. James, by her side, stayed quiet but present. His silence wasn't empty, it was support. Slowly, Mia realized love wasn't the absence of battles, but the decision to stay despite them. One night, James brought her to the hotel rooftop. There were no guests, no blinding lights, just the city stretched out before them, millions of glowing windows. "This is my world when no one's watching," he said. Mia stepped to the edge, watching the lights flicker. "It's beautiful," she admitted, "but it still scares me." James took her hand. "I don't want you to get used to it. I just want you to know that even here, you'll never be alone." She looked at him, surprised by his vulnerability. "You seem like a different man when you're with me." James smiled. "Maybe because with you, I don't have to be anyone else but myself." Mia laughed softly, moved. "You talk like I've cast some kind of spell." He shook his head. "It's not magic, Mia. It's just truth. And truth always outlasts the noise." A gust of wind swept across the rooftop, and Mia shivered. James slipped off his coat and draped it over her shoulders without a word. The simple gesture said more than any speech. She closed her eyes for a moment, soaking in his warmth. In that silence, she realized she felt safer than she ever had in any ballroom or headline. It was there, in that moment, that her heart finally rested. Doubt still lingered, but fear began turning into courage. "Maybe I'll never be ready for your world, James," she confessed. He squeezed her hand gently. "Then I'll build a world where you feel at home." Mia laughed through her tears. "You make it sound so easy." James replied, "It's not, but nothing worth it ever is." The next morning, James surprised Mia by showing up at her place without a luxury car, without an expensive suit. Just him, carrying a grocery bag. Brought fresh bagels and cream cheese. "Your aunt said you love them." Mia laughed, startled. "Trying to win me over through my stomach?" He smiled. "Maybe, but mostly because I want to sit at your table with you." They ate together, laughing at little things, like two ordinary people. Her nephew, excited, showed James a drawing he'd made. It was of their building, with two figures holding hands in front. "That's you and Aunt Mia," he explained. James smiled, moved, and kept the drawing as if it were treasure. Mia watched quietly, her heart swelling with tenderness. She realized he wasn't just a visitor in her life anymore. He was becoming part of it, piece by piece, in real ways. Days later, James canceled an important meeting to help Mia organize a community event. He carried chairs, handed out food, laughed with kids. At first, locals eyed him with suspicion, but soon they warmed up. From a distance, Mia felt pride rise within her. "You really are trying, aren't you?" she asked. He smiled, sweaty but happy. "Not trying. Choosing." That night, after the event, they walked down a street lit by old lampposts. The silence between them was comfortable, full of unspoken promises. Mia suddenly stopped, looking at James. "You could have anyone. Why me?" He drew a steady breath, meeting her eyes. "Because you saw me when I was invisible. Because with you, I'm not the hotel owner. I'm just James. And that's all I've ever wanted to be." Tears slipped down Mia's cheeks, but not from sadness. For the first time, she didn't fight what she felt. She leaned closer, resting her forehead against his. "I don't know what this will look like, James. I don't know if I'll survive everything that comes with you. But I know I don't want to run anymore." He pulled her into a tight embrace, as if that moment was the answer he'd been waiting for all along. Back at the apartment, Mia's aunt welcomed them with a warm smile. "Finally," she said, hugging them both. Her nephew cheered, running around the living room. James laughed, realizing that for the first time in years, he was home. Not in a penthouse, not in a ballroom, but in that simple apartment full of life, where he'd found something money could never be. The end of the night, Mia wrote in her notebook, "Love isn't about the world we live in. It's about who we choose to stand beside us." She closed it with a smile, her heart light. For the first time, there was no fear, only hope. James, lying on the small couch, looked over at Mia, making tea in the kitchen. "She thought I was just the driver," he reflected. "But I found out I was the passenger in her journey." And he smiled, finally at peace. In the end, Mia realized it was never about who owned hotels or who lived in small apartments. It was about two hearts that found each other in the silence of a cold night. She thought he was just the driver waiting outside, but discovered he was the man willing to wait for her, inside and outside of any world. And James, once lost under the weight of titles, found in Mia the courage to simply be human. Their love wasn't born under spotlights, but in small gestures, and that's what made it real. That if this story touched you, imagine how many more are yet to come here on Beyond Fortune. Comment below. Do you believe love can bloom in the most unexpected places? Like this video if you felt every emotion along with Mia and James. Share it with someone who needs to believe in unlikely encounters. And subscribe now to the channel so you won't miss any of the upcoming stories.